this whole career was kind of an accident. You know, I was a property analyst, and then I went on The Bachelor as a joke, and then this all kind of happened. I've never been one to be scared about aging. I've never really understood people that are freaked out about it. I feel that I'm often a scapegoat for a lot of these centre-right or right-wing or conservative or older audiences. Whenever women dominate industries, it's then discredited and undermined. I saw a headline on Facebook that was like, feminist catfight. And it's like very demeaning.
Abbie Chatfield, welcome back to the Stella podcast.
Thank you. Back again for our yearly catch-up.
I was going to say, this is how I get to catch up with you. Once a year, you sit down, we have a little conversation with annoying microphones in the way, but then it's the cover of Stella.
It's great.
It has been almost a year between Stella covers. A lot has been going on, a lot to unpack, you and me. But I want to actually throw forward a little bit because later this month, June, you have a milestone birthday coming up. 30. Oh my goodness. How are you feeling about the big 30?
So excited. I've never been one to be scared about aging. I've never really understood people that are freaked out about it. I've even tried to because of societal pressure and expectations. Everyone's like, oh, don't ask my age. I go, why? I'm happy that I've made it to 30. Very exciting. And I don't know. I love aging because every year you look back and you know how they say if you cringe at yourself a year ago, then you're making progress. Like every year I think that I get better and smarter, as everyone does. I think you learn more, you understand more, and you look back at things you did a year ago and you go, wow, what a basic thought, or what a basic thing that I did, or, you know, even emotionally, what an awful relationship I was in 4 years ago because I hadn't done the work or whatever. And I'm excited to be 30. Everyone in my life says their 30s are the best, so I can't wait.
30s are great. And I think something else that happens with a lot of people when you have a birthday is, apart from that, particularly for women, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm running out of time, I'm getting older, where's the time gone? Is that a lot of people think, what have I been doing? But for you, Abbie, I know it always looks different from the outside, but there's surely that couldn't be one of the, when you have that good cringe moment. I would imagine one of the things for you surely is not, I haven't done enough stuff.
Yes, definitely not that. That definitely is not a thought that crosses my mind because this whole career was kind of an accident. You know, I was a property analyst, and then I went on The Bachelor as a joke, and then this all kind of happened. So it's sort of like when you, and this might sound depressing, but when you have no goals to reach, you can't really fail at those goals. Not in that you should do nothing, but in that everyone, you know, people ask me, what are you going to do in 5 years? What's next? Da-da-da. And I go, I'd love to know. I have no idea. And I've been so lucky to do so many different things just for yapping.
Because you would never have been able to predict 5 years ago if somebody had said that to you.
No.
Where are you going to be in 5 years?
Not at all, because 5 years ago was when The Bachelor had just finished airing. It was COVID. Oh my God, it was COVID 5 years ago. And I just started the podcast and I thought, you know, maybe I get 100 listens, whatever, something to do in lockdown. And now it's going really well. And I interviewed the Prime Minister. It's crazy. And the former leader of the Greens, Adam Bandt. And it's just a very... I'm very happy with all that I've done, and I'm very excited for a holiday in between all that I've done to come back and possibly do more. Let's see.
Good way to spend a 30th birthday, I think, is on holiday.
Yes.
But that partly why I wanted to speak to you today was because of a lot of issues that came up during the federal election, and I thought I'd really love to sit down and chat to Abbie about some of this. And I've got a few headlines here that came up, for instance, during the election. And Abbie, when you just said couldn't have predicted anything, when you look back to your unexpected career and being catapulted into the spotlight after being the runner-up on The Bachelor in the 2019 series, very few people, I imagine yourself included, would have predicted that people like me would want to sit down with you in 2025. And the first thing I want to talk about is politics, your role and commentary around the federal election.
I know. I mean, very exciting that we get to talk about this, but I just want to say before anyone has a go at me, everyone is acting like I think that I'm a political expert. Everyone's like, is she going to get into politics? And it's not that I think I'm a political expert. It's that I have a big platform and I have certain beliefs, and I just voiced those beliefs. So everyone holds me to this standard of being a political expert or a political commentator, quote unquote. If I wanted to do that, I would get into a newsroom, or I would get into politics. I would try to get into politics. I just wanted to use my platform to talk about politics because it was a very important time. And currently, globally, with the far-right movement getting bigger and bigger, although it's at the time, earlier this year, it wasn't looking good in terms of far-right fascist movements overtaking the world. And now slowly, like Canada has rejected it. We've rejected it. I think it was Romania. Was it Bulgaria? So slowly, we're seeing a rejection of it. But at the time, it was more panic-induced. It wasn't that I thought I was some political expert. Just before we get into this, I just want to clarify that because everyone seems to think, oh, you're an expert on everything now. It's like, no, I just have ADHD and I talk a lot.
Well, when I just introduced you for this episode of the Stellar Podcast, I did not identify you as political commentator. When people listen to It's a Lot, the artwork is not shot with Parliament House in Canberra in the background, but you are daring to weigh into these issues. I will just touch upon some of those headlines I mentioned a few minutes ago. Here's just a sample because, quite frankly, you generated probably more headlines than Anthony Albanese or Peter Dutton put together. Abbie Chatfield joins Greens push to keep Dutton out in new ad. Abbie Chatfield posts to be probed by Australian Electoral Commission. Abbie Chatfield cleared of wrongdoing by AEC after interviewing Anthony Albanese on her podcast. Abbie Chatfield despairs as her political hero, Greens leader Adam Bandt, faces election defeat. ABC believe Abbie Chatfield is the way to go for Australia's political debates. I mean, as I say, the fact that you became a player, not because you were saying, okay, here's political commentator, here's political heavyweight Abbie Chatfield's verdict on it. You were using your platform to interview people, make commentary. No one's saying that anyone has to agree with anyone, but the oxygen that it created, how did that sit with you?
Oh, it's so annoying because what happens is, as you probably know more than anyone, I feel as though there's this thing with me in particular with the mainstream Australian media where I do anything and suddenly it's as though, like I was saying before, I think that I'm an expert when it's actually just journalists. I don't use that term lightly when it comes to the Daily Mail. People who are writing articles knowing that it'll get engagement, because if there's a headline saying that I seem to think that I know anything about politics, it'll get negative engagement and maybe positive engagement as well from people that like me and follow me, but mainly negative engagement. And there's this flooding of headlines about me. Then people think that I'm an expert they think that I think that I'm an expert. They act as though I'm there writing all the articles about myself. When in reality, I just wanted for my audience to understand the literal basics of the election, like how preferential voting works or the difference between Labor and Liberal. Because around this time, I was also doing Married at First Sight recaps. So I had this whole new audience and I would have done it regardless, but I think it was really good to bring in an audience that hadn't ever thought about the election, that were coming for pop culture stuff. And for them to realise, oh, I shouldn't just do, I shouldn't do a throwaway vote. I shouldn't just go, oh, Labor and Liberal are the same, it doesn't matter. I should think about independence. I shouldn't listen to American rhetoric saying that it's a wasted vote if you vote for an independent or Greens or a smaller party, a minor party. So it was me just trying to get my audience to understand basics and understand even just that there is a vote compass, very basic stuff. And then suddenly it's turned into this. And the AEC stuff was just a whole other level of, I believe, discrediting smaller voices, but also discrediting outspoken young women. And it seems to be in media, when women do more than one thing, they're deemed as inept at all the things they do. But when men do more than one thing, it's like, wow, he's a footy player and he can read an auto cue. Whereas women, if I am on a reality TV show, I host a reality TV show, I have a podcast, I do radio, I do all these things, then I must be good at nothing. Because if I'm a if I'm a reality TV show host, I can't know anything about politics. If I think I know anything about politics, how could I be funny enough to have a radio show? If I have a radio show, I'll be actually just an influencer. And it feels like people think it's a zero-sum game. And this is why these headlines frustrate me so much, because it's positioning me as having an ego about politics, but also as, oh, she's trying to be an expert on something new. It's like, I'm literally asking questions. I'm interviewing people, as you are now. I'm literally inquiring. And it's quite frustrating. And like I said, the AEC thing was the most frustrating, and made me feel really targeted, as I feel that I'm often a scapegoat for a lot of these centre-right or right-wing or conservative or older audiences in terms of the media, because of how the media portrays me as being the spokesperson on things, and then they go, oh, and she's talking again. You know what I mean? It's this weird cycle. So that's how I felt about those headlines.
There's a lot of fascinating threads of that chat that I'd like to pursue. One of them would be the gender aspect that you raised there. And Hannah Ferguson, the founder of Cheek Media, she recently addressed the National Press Club, and she said, influencer has been the dirtiest word of this campaign. The agenda is clear: to undermine our intelligence, to paint us as untrustworthy. There's nothing wrong with being an influencer, but the label is intended to cause significant reputational damage. The impact is deeply misogynistic. Would you agree with that gender aspect of it? Do you think there is a sexist or potentially even misogynistic component to the response?
Yeah, I wrote an article about this in 2020, actually, about how influencer is, at the time, I felt as though it was a very gendered insult almost. As time's gone on, personally, if someone wants to call me an influencer and use it as an insult, I don't personally care, but I do care about the impact on other women and on the industry as a whole. So it's kind of like the whole idea of slut shaming. This is how I see it. I don't personally care if someone calls me a slut, because I go, well, I don't have any shame in sleeping with lots of people, right? I personally have no shame, but I don't like slut shaming in terms of how it impacts women and how it is a patriarchal idea that's really enforced. Same with influencing. It seems to be throughout time, whenever women dominate industries, it's then discredited and undermined. Even things like teaching and nursing, incredibly important industries, the backbone of our society, really, that is continually undermined in terms of their pay packets, in terms of the way they're treated by patients and parents, and the disrespect they get. And I believe that that's because it's predominantly women that are doing it. And it's also assumed that women should be the natural caretakers. When it comes to influencing, I don't think that discrimination is as intense as it is towards women who are literally saving lives and literally educating the future. I'm not going to claim that I'm on the same level as a teacher or a nurse, but I do think it's a similar repeated notion that women are dominating. We earn more money than men in this industry. We have louder voices. We have bigger platforms. Women are the main spenders and the main engagers in podcasting and in social media. So then it's seen as lesser value. It's also funny. I think Hannah said this on her podcast, or it may have been in her press club. Hannah's also my friend, so I love her so much. I think she was saying, maybe it was over dinner with me, I can't remember when she was saying this, because she's the same all the time. She's wonderful all the time. But Mark Boris, for example, he would never be called an influencer. He's a business owner first, for sure, but there are many business owners. For example, Brittany Lee Saunders. She has that incredible business fate. I think women call her a business owner, but I think everyone sees her as an influencer or a YouTuber. It's kind of like that's the lowest common denominator. And I think in this election, that was even more so the case. These far-right men who are posting about restricting abortion access, or these men that are doing mocking videos of me, which was all over my For You page, that are far-right, and they're blatantly, openly misogynistic. They openly don't want women to have rights, and immigrants to have rights, and people who are oppressed to have rights, First Nations people. Yet they're not called influencers. They're called commentators. They're called media personalities. Yet me, someone who's hosted TV shows, radio, I've done every medium you can do, yet I'm an influencer when it comes to politics. So it is quite reductive and dismissive. But personally, my theory is anyone that has an issue with influencers for a sexist reason, I think, well, if you were offered to post money if you were offered money to post on the internet, you would take it and you would then be an influencer. So I think with a lot of these men, it comes from jealousy of not being able to hone in on that aspect. Obviously, others don't like influencers for other reasons, whatever. When it comes to the sexism and the misogyny, I think that it's a very easy way to discredit women, and also undermines how much intelligence and forethought and planning and kind of business mind it takes to have a following that is dedicated and engaged enough to monetize, or a podcast. And we were talking about before how much effort it takes to do the podcast. People act as though you rock up and you yap and you go home. And it's hours and hours and hours of work, and it's work that we enjoy doing, but it's not just nothing. And then I think, sorry, I'm going on, but I have so many thoughts about this. Then I think about, the whole idea of, well, influencing isn't a real job and it should be dismissed because you, quote unquote, don't work, which, okay, I've had a 9-to-5 job. I've done radio, TV, everything that I could do. And I would say I personally work more hours doing this job. That doesn't mean that I work more hours than everyone else has a normal job. Personally, how I operated in a 9-to-5, I would sleep on my boss's desk and I would go for lunch from 1 till 4. So personally, my work ethic is better doing influencing. That doesn't mean it's a harder job, but I do work. But also, if someone thinks I don't work, that's fine. My issue then comes with, why do we then have to work ourselves to a bone to prove that we're worthy of having a platform or having a voice? I think it's fine to think that influencers don't work enough because the pay is completely outweighs the actual hours input. Absolutely. But when you say that influencing isn't a real job, even though, the ATO fucking thinks it does. Jesus Christ. The ATO is on my back all the time. But it really makes out like our only worth comes in, a real job only exists if you're working yourself to the bone, which is a whole other conversation about capitalism. But I'll let you ask me another question because I've been talking for 45 minutes.
Well, everything you say, there's like 5 other things that I want to ask about. But I'll go back actually to when you were saying you wrote about this 5 years ago about the sexism inherent in the way that we dismiss women or try to put labels on, well, you're getting a little bit too big for your boots there. As somebody that feels sometimes closer to 130 than turning 30, I remember when Julia Gillard became Prime Minister in 2010, and in that time she had a morning tea where there were, brace yourselves, people from women's media, quote unquote, there, who were being called mummy bloggers at the time. So 15 years ago, that was the parlance. So mummy bloggers this, mummy bloggers that. And I remember writing about it thinking, well, why is that any different to, previous prime ministers like John Howard going and having morning tea with the Australian cricket team?
Yes.
This is a photo opportunity. They're talking about serious issues. They're going on speaking to different high-profile figures, and as you say, that's an exchange of ideas. Is this not what we want from our elected representatives? We want them to be representing the entire country, which, by the way, includes a few women, maybe whatever you want to call them.
The Liberal Party may want to remember that.
So mummy blogger, I feel, was weaponised in the way that the phrase influencer has been during this recent federal election.
That's really interesting. I was in grade 10 when that was happening, so I didn't know about this mummy blogger era. You're so right about politicians need to speak to the everyday Australian. And when we put a threshold on who is allowed to be engaged in political conversation, that only allows a certain group of people to be engaged and aware of politics. And I think that's what mainstream media want and what the two major parties want. And when we have people like, quote unquote, mummy bloggers or influencers speaking to their audiences, people get threatened because then the public can understand how much their vote actually counts. And it feels like when we exclude certain groups of people, particularly women in this instance, but all different marginalised groups, and we exclude them, we're making their vote count a little bit less. Because the way that a lot of young people vote. I don't know if it still happens, but 15 years ago isn't that long ago, but things have changed very rapidly with social media in terms of what the kids are doing these days, and I love it. I think they're slightly more engaged. But I think when I was a teenager and even in my early 20s, all my friends voted how their parents voted. And how their parents voted is how their dad voted. So really, a household was almost led by the male corporate vote, which is what these press conferences usually were filled with, people that read the Financial Review or, the Australian. And now we have more engagement. So I feel like it's distributing that power of the vote more so to every single person. And the reality is everyone had an issue with me talking about the election, but no one could say anything that I said that was wrong. It was very, like I said, it was preferential voting. It was year 4, the government stuff, that not everyone remembers or knows. I had to do a little refresher to make sure all my wording was correct, obviously, with like minority government and hung parliament and making sure it's all correct. But the reality is everyone should have access to this information, and everyone should understand how much the policies actually tangibly affect them, rather than just thinking that politicians are for that middle-aged corporate group of people. Because the reality is the actions of politicians and political parties impact everyone, but they impact young people the most because we're going to be here for the longest time out of everyone here. So I think it's very interesting the way that it makes me suspicious when there is a resistance to having everyday Australians being involved in politics.
As you and I speaking, it's June. Next month, the newly formed Anthony Albanese government will sit. Parliament will resume for the first time in July. So obviously in the recent weeks there's been a lot of very closely contested seats, and one of the high profile casualties was somebody that you just mentioned, Greens Leader Adam Bandt. Abbie, what I actually wanted to ask you about was the way that some people would respond to that news, whether that's great news or bad news for them personally, dependent on their political allegiances, rather than thinking about that, would go, oh, great, Abbie Chatfield's going to be devastated. And that's their first reaction.
Yeah, they're obsessed. It's really sad. But I think it's really funny because Adam Bandt is a lovely man. He's so great. He's wonderful. In Australia, we don't have a system like the US. It isn't like this cult of personality thing with Trump, for example, or even sometimes Democrats. Even Harris, to a certain degree, had that, and Obama had that for sure, but not as insidious as Trump. But people have a real attachment to individuals. Where in Australia, when I was in that era with Gillard and Abbott and all of this chaos, I remember when I was... there was a year where we had 3 prime ministers in a year or something. We don't have that attachment to individuals. So it is funny. People are going, and you're crying about Adam Bandt still. I got comments still today. Anything. I upload a dancing video, cry about Adam Bandt. I think Adam Bandt was a great leader of the Greens. Adam Bandt lost his seat. That's upsetting for him. The Greens aren't non-existent, and my main motivation is to make people think about the impacts of the major parties, and I would hope that a minority government would exist soon. So that could also come in the form of supporting independence. I'm not, and this is the mistake I think a lot of people on the right make, is because they are, particularly Trump supporters, Australian Trump supporters, they are under the influence of a cult-like personality. Some of them are actually in a cult. And they think that everyone else exists that way with politicians. I'm not a fangirl of Adam Bandt. I like the Greens' policies, and he was the leader at the time. So I have no personal feelings about it. Even that headline there that says Abbie shows despair. I think I uploaded an Instagram story going, guys, I'm freaking out. That's all I did in between 400 other stories. And then it's held on to like I'm some overly emotional, hysterical woman who's sobbing about Adam Bandt. That sucks. Larissa Waters is an incredible Greens leader. She has been a lawyer. She's a woman. She is a single parent, I believe, currently. And I met her and she's from Queensland like me. I think it's fabulous. So having new leadership isn't something that makes me cry or upset. I was trying to get progressive policies on the table for Australians. it wasn't that I had a sports team that was going to win, and it's not the NRL it's not the state of origin. I felt as though Greens policies would help. And the Greens did well in the Senate, considering, and I'm not crying about it as much as they'd love. It's bizarre that the first thought is I'm going to get Abbie Chatfield. That's because of headlines like this. It reinforces their ideas that I am emotionally invested in things. Both sides think that I'm an expert and that I'm emotionally invested in the outcome. But the reality is I'm trying to reduce harm during an election year that I think was really pivotal in our history.
I think it is also emblematic of the fact that we are living in hyper-partisan times where there is often a lack of humanity or grace shown for anyone that has a different view. And I think that you can see that bubble up at election times and election nights and in the days after, where people will go, ha, 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 your side lost, like it is a football game. That example that you just gave. What about for you then on the other side? So I was glued to all of the media platforms on election night. And when Peter Dutton conceded, I thought there were a lot of great speeches that night on all sides of the political divide. And I personally thought that Peter Dutton's concession speech was fantastic.
Yes.
And I'd love to ask you about that, Abbie, how you feel about that. And do you think that we as a society show enough grace when the other side doesn't win, whoever we feel, because we all saw globally what happened in 2020 in the US when Donald Trump wouldn't concede. I think, I was never necessarily a huge Bill Shorten fan, but I thought his concession speech in 2019 against Scott Morrison was incredibly gracious. I just think I'm just trying to make it quite partisan, because I do think you can. It's important in a leader, even if they're about to pack out the door. So again, very long ADHD worded question here. No. But I did want to ask you about that notion about it being a football game and about this hyper-partisanship, because I definitely think that the two sides can give as ugly as each other.
Yes, I think that the concession speech from Dutton was good, great, wonderful. And as you said, it's very important that there is a calm and dignified exit for the sake of that party in particular, no matter which side of the aisle it is. I do think, though, this idea that both sides can be as bad as each other is interesting and quite frustrating for me, to be honest, because one side is saying they want to restrict women's access to abortion, they don't want to care about climate change, they don't think that they should be welcome to country, they think that we shouldn't give any assistance or mind to our First Nations people as they systemically oppressed, they want to get rid of trans rights. There's a real need, it feels like far right people is who I'm talking about, not people who are Liberal voters, centre right, but far right people come into, for example, my comments and say the most horrific things. I'll reply with saying this is disgusting, and I'll get told that I'm fueling the war between the two sides or that I'm making the divide greater, when the reality is it's often provocation from people who are trolling on the internet and who are harassing people online, and they believe that their view is as equal as someone else's. I don't believe that someone who is transphobic or someone who thinks that First Nations people don't deserve equal rights, I don't think their view is equal to the view of someone that does believe people deserve equal rights. I don't think that is a crazy thing for me to feel, particularly when it comes to MAGA. In the US, I think there's much more of a partisan divide. I think Australia, because of our preferential voting, I think, and I hope, and even from my point of view, I think everyone that is still supporting Trump is genuinely, I think they are a deeply bad person. I think it is, at this point, not acceptable. I think people who are supporting Dutton are not that way. I don't think that. I think that they have regular ways of voting. They may have their own selfish interests. I don't agree with some of the things, a lot of the Liberal Party policies, but there are some policies that I was like, yeah, sure. Like them increasing the mental health Medicare. Sure. There were some policies that I was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. It isn't as extreme in Australia, and I think it is because of preferential voting. Because in the States, they can kind of get away with going, well, you have to choose between these two. That's all you've got, and either you're going to be on the woke left or you're going to be on MAGA. Whereas in Australia, we can kind of, I mean, by definition, do our preferences. So it's kind of, I don't think that both sides are as bad as each other, because one side is, if we're talking about far-right extremists, I'm not talking about people, like I said, that are centre-right or, you know, things like that in Australia. But I think at this point, people that are MAGA or MAGA-esque in their thinking, at this stage, they're supporting mass deportations of US citizens. They are anti the Constitution. They have elected a convicted felon. I think it's very different. And the hate, quote unquote, the hateful left is always reactionary to someone saying something that is genuinely dangerous. But I do think there's more middle ground and grey area in Australia than the US. I think the US it's not going to go well, to be honest.
If someone was listening to this and they said, oh, no, I've been completely booted off Twitter back in the day, which is now known as X. I'm mentioning that because that became somewhere that I think it's really just, it's an absolute cesspit now.
Yes.
But I think there was a time going back to even those Gillard years I was talking about, where I saw a lot of people that were centre-left that became very disenfranchised and disillusioned with the progressive side of politics, because there was a lot of trolling and a lot of what we would now demonise as quote-unquote woke. Just for the record, I actually hate the phrase woke, and I hated the phrase politically correct. I think it's just a way of silencing people that are trying to stand up for issues. But I definitely do know that there will be a lot of people that go, no, I've been victimised by progressives. So that's why I just always think it's interesting, the humanity of it.
Yes.
So in the US, there was during the US presidential campaign, which I agree with you, Abbie, I think, thank God, it is very different here.
Yes.
But there were op-eds being written by people saying, I went on a blind date, turned out that he was a Trump voter, and I left the blind date. And I remember thinking, oh gosh, like, I personally don't think me as a person at this point in my life would ever feel that there's not more to a person than that. What about for you? Do you, as you say, Dutton was a different character?
Yeah, Dutton was a different. I think with Trump supporters, people who support Trump, he has bragged about sexually assaulting women. If you can look past that, he is an incredibly racist, misogynistic man. He took out a whole ad in the New York Times, I believe, with the Central Park Five, calling for their execution, 5 innocent black men. He refused to lease out his properties to black people in the US. So there is history of very clear racism, sexism. He said that all Mexicans are rapists. He's currently deporting children who are without any safety. There are ICE raids going on, and US citizens are being sent without due process to El Salvador. I think that is, I don't think that's a safe person to be around. I would not want to be around someone that supports a felon proven to be liable for rape, brags about sexual assault. That's not someone that I think is safe for women to be around. I don't think women should date Trump supporters. I think I don't think you can have, or people that support Andrew Tate, people that support, Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson at this stage. I think these far right people are actively dangerous to women, and I don't think that anyone should be dating someone who's a misogynist. I don't think you should be, if they're a woman, it's like you wouldn't ask a trans person to date a transphobe. You wouldn't ask a gay person to date a homophobe. You wouldn't ask a person of colour to date a racist. So why are we okay with women dating misogynists? It's not okay. It's very dangerous, in fact. So I would definitely never date someone who even was apolitical personally. I think that's a huge privilege to be apolitical. But if you're a Trump supporter, you're either incredibly uneducated or you're a bad person. That's my personal opinion. I don't think it's okay. In terms of Dutton, though, I think a lot of Australians vote the way their parents vote. And with mandatory voting, there are a lot of people in Australia, and this differs from the US as well, people vote passionately in the US. We vote obligatory, which I think is wonderful. I think it's good that we're forced to be involved in this. In terms of Dutton supporters, it's a similar thing, but not as extreme. I think that everyone should date whoever they want to, and political voting is an indication of moral values. And I think that if you differ on certain policies, I mean, someone could say, I'm going to vote for Dutton because I think that super policy, taking a super ad is good, but I don't believe in anything else. I'd say, okay, so you don't understand that policy or how that could impact housing prices and your super in the future. That's workable. You know what I mean? But I think it's completely reasonable to not want to date someone who is politically dangerous to you.
I am conscious of time, so there's so many other things I want to ask you about.
Oh my God, the ADHD, sorry.
No, it's great. There are just so many other political questions I wanted to ask, but I did want to also move on to something else that's made news recently with yourself, which is actually just with Clementine Ford, the writer, who recently went after you on her newsletter, I think, and said, this is why we have Australian influencers like Abbie Chatfield profiting from the performance of being politically engaged and presenting herself as a voice of feminist and political authority, while railing against anyone who demands more from her than shallow aphorisms and platforming genocide supporters, unquote. You responded on TikTok. I don't really need to rehash what you said. Because you will obviously give me a more updated version now. But just to briefly recap for anyone that might have missed this, I mean, look, is there anything more than our wider culture loves Abbie than two high-profile women disagreeing? So most people would have heard about it, but at the time you just said, well, what she's doing is continually over months at random intervals deciding to go on tirades about me. These are full of lies and exaggerations. She's created content specifically about me, naming me, lying about me and exaggerating all these things. I've been ignoring this and taking the high road for months, despite the aggressive trolling and harassment. Obviously, I'm sure you have much to say about this, but I wanted to start by asking you, with all of those headlines and the way that something like that, there's so much heat around it from a public point of view, what's it like for you being in the middle of a story like that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm in the middle of stories like that all the time. So it's kind of unfortunately my norm, but it's never enjoyable or pleasant. The reason why I started talking about what Clementine had been saying was kind of by accident. I was talking about something else in general, the way that there is this expectation of, if you are speaking about one topic, for example, the election or something political, then it seems to make people have this, I don't want to say infighting, because that feels like, again, like a right wing. It's kind of like the way that the quote unquote woke thing where you go, that feels like a catch-all that isn't really right. But there's this idea that if you aren't doing everything, then you're performative. If you aren't all day, every day talking about every single topic that is possible, then you're performative. And that then discourages people from speaking about political issues. And people can say that isn't true. I know influencers. I know musicians. I know actors. I'm sure you do as well. People are too scared to speak about things even as basic as climate change, because there will be people that are saying that it isn't good enough, and they'll go through with a fine-tooth comb and find all the reasons why you're performative. And there seems to be more focus on finding if someone is performative versus focusing on people that aren't doing anything at all, aren't speaking at all, or are being outright dangerous. And the reason why the Clementine's comments was so distressing to me, it wasn't that she had the opinion that I shouldn't have had Anthony Albanese on the podcast. I understand that opinion. The reason I had him on the podcast, like I was saying before, was to give my audience access to his policies. I asked the questions. I had an hour with the Prime Minister to cover every single election topic. And I am very proud of how I did that podcast. People have demanded that I apologise for it. I am proud of how I did the podcast. I think the podcast did what I wanted it to do, and that was convert people who either didn't vote at all, who said, I'll just cop the fine, people who voted Liberal, or people who were so apolitical. They would just go, I guess I like the look of this person's poster, whatever. The point was to engage people politically, not for me to debate the Prime Minister. But I understand the criticisms. I totally hear it. I get it. But my issue isn't the criticisms. And I think this happens a little bit, not too often, but what Clementine was doing was, it's ironic the way that she is assuming malicious intent from an outspoken woman in media. I find it very ironic that she's also believing these headlines that I'm making myself a feminist voice. I'm making myself a political... I'm just speaking about my opinions. These are my true opinions. I don't know anyone that would voluntarily get trolled violently all day, every day for a fucking Instagram post. I could do the most listened to podcast I've ever done was an interview with an ex-Love Island contestant, and then it comes the maths recaps. I could do that so easily. Every week I could do Love Island, Married at First Sight, Batch. I could do all of them all year long, and I'd earn more money than I am now. But the reality is my podcast is entirely, and you get this with ADHD, I can't speak about things unless I'm obsessed or I'm interested or there's something there that I want to talk about. So my issue wasn't her critique on the podcast with Anthony Albanese. Many people had the same critique, and I was okay with that. But it's when it comes to demanding that I apologize for something that I had a reason for doing that podcast. But also when it comes to her lying about me, that was when I was really frustrated because I didn't realize what she'd been saying. And it wasn't just her newsletter. It was her Substack, her newsletter, Instagram stories, also about Hannah Ferguson as well. She'd called me an idiotic narcissist. She said that I don't prep for my own podcast. She'd said that I parrot uncredited sound bites or something similar, essentially saying that I'm a complete fraud. I don't have any thoughts of my own. I'm a deeply basic thinker and a very smart self-promoter. All these things that were attacking my character, which I am not okay with. You can critique my work all you like, but I'm not sure why, as a prominent feminist voice, currently you're deciding to include me in newsletters, Substacks, all these things, because I didn't do my activism exactly the way that you would like me to. The critique is fine. The personal attacks are not. And the personal attacks in themselves, calling me a narcissist repeatedly, giving me a personality diagnosis, saying that I change my personality every week. It's just different podcast topics, but okay. It kind of instills this idea of like a hysterical, outspoken woman in media, and that I do too many things again. And it's very ironic, this whole thing. And there are things that Clementine has done that I don't agree with at all, but I haven't said anything about it, and I won't say anything about it in depth because I don't have any interest in discrediting a woman who most likely experiences and has experienced for longer than me the same trolling that I get from right-wing weirdos, because all you're doing is giving them more fuel in order to troll me. People who have genuine critiques is not trolling, but the reality is people on the left and the right can troll. And this idea that because I'm not doing things perfectly, that I'm an idiotic narcissist, I don't know anything, I'm brain dead, I'm a deeply basic thinker, all these, they're just insults. It's not actually critiquing my work. And it was really hurtful, because then after that, the right-wing comments come in saying, nothing better than a cat fight, Clementine for two feminists fighting, so you can't even agree with each other. And that's why I hadn't spoken about her ever and the things that she'd done that I don't agree with. And even to this day, she's done things since then that I've seen that people have asked me to comment on that. I'm not commenting on it. I don't want to comment about her work. She can comment about mine, but I certainly would never comment about her having a personality disorder or anything like that. And I think that it's just, deeply ironic that I also think there's a space in feminism for people to have quote unquote basic thoughts, because as we were talking about before, to get people in, you can't start with the finals of a gender studies course. There are people who don't even know what the patriarchy is, women, or people that don't even know what domestic labor is, basic things. And that isn't their fault. It's because society doesn't teach us. So personally, if she thinks that my thoughts are basic, that's okay, but I'm not sure why there's so much anger and vitriol behind a basic thought. I see influencers all the time that are fashion influencers or they do other things and they have basic takes on feminism, but they're correct. I'll do a repost. I go, reshare. I'm not angry at them for having a quote unquote basic thought. I go, how amazing. Now we have the women who are engaged in this fashion influencers post understanding that financial independence is important, for example, or that coercive control exists, or the basics of DV. That makes me happy. The more people that are involved in this conversation makes me happy if they aren't saying things that are incorrect or damaging. And while Clementine would say that me having Anthony Albanese on the podcast is damaging, there are two different goals that we have. I was trying to bring in more people to understand to keep Dutton out, and I don't agree with Anthony Albanese's stance on Gaza or the Labor Party's stance on Gaza at all. Peter Dutton's stance was much worse. And I just wanted to keep Peter Dutton out for a myriad of reasons. And I think it's interesting other than that, it's just attacking my personality. But everyone then hears those things and they assume malice. Even in like the language that is used around me by some people who believe that I'm a narcissist on the left and say that I'm performative, everything that I do is overanalyzed. Even those stories that I posted about Clementine, it was like, there was one comment that I saw on someone's post going, the way she victimized herself and then did an ad the next day proves that she's performative. That doesn't prove anything. That proves that I had a contractual obligation. And these are the same people that would have an issue with influencers not, quote unquote, not working. I have work to do. I have to do work. I can't pause that work because I'm feeling incredibly depressed and having a PTSD trigger. I have to post the thing. I have to do it. It's also scheduled already. So I'm not going to unschedule it. But even the wording of like she victimizes herself rather than saying she's upset about something, it's this assumption again, and it comes from the far left. And I want to say far left is a bit much. It comes from a certain part of the left. It isn't even on the spectrum. It's certain people online that want to find evidence that I'm an awful, awful person. And I am really beyond sick of it. It feels like because I do get this media attention, then I'm punished for it by all sides. And everyone says, see, you're not perfect. And I go, I never said that I was. So I'm just posting what I'm interested in or what I care about. And I will apologize for things if I feel that I need to. But having Anthony Albanese on the podcast, I know personally changed thousands of votes. I got thousands of DMs from people. Some, my friend's dad, who's a truck driver in Queensland, who's voted Liberal and One Nation his whole life, he voted for the Labor Party. And in my opinion, voting for the Labor Party in this election was preferred over the Liberal Party, in my opinion, and also in the opinion of left-wing politics. I don't think that I have the power to change a Liberal voter to vote Greens or Victorian Socialists. I wish that I did. But I also interviewed a Victorian Socialist. I also interviewed someone from the Greens. And the strategy that I had was to go from Labor to Greens to Socialists to ease them into the water like frogs. And I just felt that it was important in this election to talk to Anthony Albanese. But it is hurtful coming from a prominent feminist because then it turns into headlines I saw a headline on Facebook that was like feminist catfight, and it's like very demeaning, and that isn't Clementine's fault, but it is something that she should have considered and that I have considered when I haven't called her out for things that I would say are deeply damaging, but I'm not going to go into them.
Last time we spoke about your relationship with Adam Hyde, your partner. You've been together for a while now. When we spoke last year, you were saying you felt a lot more optimistic about it than you had normally in a relationship. Sounds like good reason for that because you're still together. Coming up to 30, love to ask you about going into your 30s. Very old-fashioned question here, but you will no doubt get it. Are you starting to think differently about relationships? Are people starting to say, when are you going to put a ring on it, Abbie and Adam?
Well, my friends are not really my first friend got married a couple of weeks ago. My friends are all in their mid-30s and all of them are just... So my friends aren't really adhering to that kind of societal norm. So not really. And I have a single mother. So my mum isn't really doing it. Mum is doing the... God, my friend Sue's got a grandchild. Isn't that lovely? She's doing subtle, quote unquote, subtle hints. But I think that I think that I've always been like, if I get married, great. If I have kids, great. Whatever, we'll see what happens. And I'm still kind of in that. But if I was going to have kids with anyone, it would be Adam. He's just been, it's like a year and a half now, a year and a bit. I don't know. And he moved in recently, and it's all just been so great. And it's really quite jarring in a lot of ways, seeing what a healthy relationship is like from the inside. Like it's quite, makes me go, whoa. So I guess I'm thinking of relationships differently in that I see this relationship from the inside and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have ever been with any of those losers before. Like that was a big mistake on my behalf. So it's been great. I said to Adam, and I said on TikTok, I think, I was saying that, I had an epiphany about our relationship and about relationships in general. And I've realized the more that I'm with Adam, the less that I feel like I need to be with him. But it's more that I want to be with him more. I want to more. But that's something I'd never had in a relationship. And from that, I know that, hopefully Adam and I are together forever, touch wood. But if we weren't together, this relationship has changed my outlook on relationships, in that I understand that I should only be in a relationship if it's genuinely benefiting me in more than one aspect of my life. Because the amount of work I've been able to do and the amount of, friendships I've been able to dive deeper into, and the amount of more time I have having a happy relationship versus having this thing that drains you when you're talking about it and thinking about it and you're anxious and it's awful. It's like I either need to be alone or be with Adam. Those are kind of my two options at this point, in a good way, a romantic relationship isn't necessary. It is a wonderful add-on, but my value and my actual life benefits more when I'm not worrying about the toxic, shitty relationships. So the options are a perfect one or none at all. And Adam and I are wonderful. So that's how it's changed.
I love that for you, Abbie. You mentioned your mum there.
Yeah.
There's been rumours she might be popping up on the Golden Bachelor.
Don't do that to me.
But I'm okay. I don't think Abbie's going to answer that. But I'm just saying. We saw what you being runner-up on the Bachelor 6 years ago has done for the Australian media. It's never been the same since.
Oh God.
Love to see that happen again with the next generation.
Oh my God. Yeah, time will tell. Don't make me do that. But I guess that's kind of an answer, isn't it? But I work for Warner Brothers, so I'm not going to say anything.
Abbie, happy birthday. All the best for your 30th. I will look forward to seeing you again. We'll do this again in a year, will we?
See you in a year.
31 and I turn 131. And you can hear more from the fabulous Abbie Chatfield on It's a Lot, wherever you get your podcasts.